Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am super excited to get today's show started. But before I do so, I need to ask our audience for a few favors. Please be sure to visit cobrt.com. You can sign up for our newsletter while you're there. Check out our media tab for our past event photos and videos, as well as this radio podcast page. Also, be sure to check out our events page. We have lots of fun events coming up. At the end of this month, we have an event with Export-Import Bank of USA. We also have two events coming up in August 22nd and 23rd. On the 22nd, we are talking public lands, and on the 23rd, we have a very exciting event, a conversation with Gary Shapiro of Consumer Technology Association. But let's go ahead and get today's show started. I have in studio with me Kelly Caufield of Colorado Succeeds. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Alex. I really appreciate it.
Yes, my pleasure. So we are talking public policy, particularly on the education, workforce development side of things. And I definitely want to get into our work together and things that we've got on the horizon. But before we do that, one thing I make all of my guests do when they get in the hot seat here is talk a little bit about themselves. So I just want to know a little bit about your background and your career and ultimately why you ended up at Colorado Succeeds.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. I started working at Colorado Succeeds in January of 2017. So I have now navigated 3 legislative sessions here in Colorado, which feels really good. It's been really exciting to learn more about state policy and how state legislatures work. Before coming to Colorado Succeeds, more of my career, the majority of the career, was spent in Washington, D.C. doing federal policy at the education and workforce arena. So I spent about 8 years working on Capitol Hill in D.C., working for U.S. Senator Mike Enzi of Wyoming. Worked for him when he was the top Republican on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, primarily focusing on workforce development policy and reauthorizing the Workforce Investment Act. That was our primary task when I worked for him. And it was an exciting time to be working in the United States Senate because the top Democrat was Ted Kennedy. So we worked very closely with Kennedy's staff and did not get to interact with him that closely as a junior staffer, but was really impressed by that bipartisanship that Senators Enzi and Kennedy had. After working in the Senate, I worked in the U.S. House of Representatives for Congressman Lou Barletta of Pennsylvania, who was a member of the House Education and Workforce Committee. So moved from the Senate to the House to see how the House of Representatives works. True democracy there, much more diverse and large and lively body. So that was exciting to navigate life on the House side as well. Yeah. And then after 8 years on Capitol Hill, I became a federal lobbyist for an HR association known as the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, representing nearly 300,000 HR professionals across the country, and lobbied labor, workforce, and some education policy for them. Really loved working for the HR Association. They're doing incredible work around workplace flexibility and paid leave policies. We did a lot on labor issues as well, really making sure that balancing act existed between employers and employees, and worked with the U.S. Business Roundtable very closely in Washington, D.C. As you know, many of the organizations here in Colorado have a national organization back in Washington. So it was very close with the Business Roundtable there and really appreciated their leadership in education policy as well at the federal level. And then it's a very common story, I feel. People really want to come to Colorado. I met my husband in Washington, D.C., and he is a Colorado native. And we had an interest in seeing life outside of Washington, and we came to Colorado. And I really was looking for an opportunity to translate those federal policy skills to the state level and still push forward education and workforce. As you know, I think it's only 8% of education spending comes from the federal level. So I knew that if I shifted my focus to the state level, my impact could actually be stronger because education and workforce policy is more of a state and local authority than federal policy. Certainly the federal government is setting a national framework, and the reauthorizations of No Child Left Behind and other large federal reauthorizations certainly set the stage, but it's really up to governors and legislators, state legislators to guide that work. So it's been really exciting to see what federal policy looks like at the state level. And Colorado Succeeds, when I got here to Colorado, I just started asking everyone, where can I go to make an impact in terms of education and workforce policy? And everyone I talked to navigated lots of networking with state agencies, with other business associations, and I kept hearing about Colorado Succeeds. It would be a good fit for someone who had worked extensively in policy and had also worked for a business association like the HR association I referenced. So it was really elated to hear they had an opening, and started working for them in the role Director of Government Affairs, and then became a Vice President of Government Affairs within this last year.
Oh, fantastic. That is quite a journey. I want to break it down just a little bit here. And you mentioned the state versus federal, right? You feel like you have more of an impact. And quite honestly, statistically speaking, you do have more of an impact. As you said, all of these policies do end up in front of governors and state legislators. But I want to talk a little bit more about the bustle between federal and state. Is it, I imagine it's a little bit different as far as the work is concerned. What do you focus more on now at the state level versus at the federal level?
It's a great question. I think at the federal level, our primary policy work was focused on large reauthorizations, large federal laws that truly are the framework for our 50 states. So, the K-12 law, it used to be called No Child Left Behind. It's now the ESSA law, Workforce Investment Act, the Higher Education Act, Perkins Career and Technical Education Act. So you're working on when I say large, I mean, it's like the ACA. They are 1,000-page laws, and they take a lot of time to refine, and you meet with numerous stakeholders across the country, people like BRT, people like Colorado Succeeds. You're working with everyone and the legislators that represent those constituencies. So that can take, really 5 to 8 years to really do a strong reauthorization of a law that has such significant implications for the country. At the state level, it's really taking that larger federal framework, and I think really having the exciting opportunity to be a little more creative with policy. Where are those policy opportunities that the state can really tap into to incentivize innovation? And that's something that Colorado Succeeds is very focused on, removing barriers and identifying ways to unleash innovation in education. So you get to work on maybe more pilots, more tests, newer ideas instead of large 1,000-page laws that take a long time to push through. I think at the state policy level, big changes still take a long time, but I'm not seeing that it will take 10 years. I think state policy is more agile than federal.
Fantastic. How about your access to legislators on the federal versus state level?
That's a great question, and I know BRT is interacting with a lot of legislators. The Colorado legislature is wonderful. It's very purple. I've really enjoyed working with Democrats and Republicans. They are normal people. They get paid $30K a year, and you really have to ask, who wants to do that? That's very hard work, and it's very time consuming. They're in session from January through May. They spend extensive amounts of time in the fall preparing for session. A lot of them serve on interim committees that meet when they are not technically in session. So it can be a full-time job.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of them have already worked really impressive careers. I've noticed that you have a lot of folks who are maybe closer to retirement, but then you also have a lot of younger folks. So it's an interesting combination of people. It's also very diverse in terms of gender, which I've been really pleased to see. There's more room to grow, I think, in other aspects of diversity here in the Colorado legislature, but it is more diverse than it is at the federal level for sure. And we also have term limits here in Colorado. You don't have that at the federal level. So, you can argue good or bad for term limits. benefits.
Yeah.
It does bring up, or it does lead to expertise in policymakers. If you are in Washington for 30 years, you really should know your stuff.
Yeah.
I think it does develop that, but it also really creates fiefdoms, and it's sometimes hard to make change. Certain states continue to win because they have the most senior members. And that's challenging. But here in Colorado, things are changing often. There are term limits. Everyone knows that this cannot be their permanent place. So I think there's more of a willingness to work together and to push forward for more bipartisan solutions.
Yeah. We talked a little bit off air, and I did a lot of traveling. I had a previous career as a flight attendant, and so I got to see a lot of places and how a lot of things work. But I have to say over and over again, Colorado by far best at working together. The collaboration here is palpable, and lots of states actually really model after us, and that's exciting stuff. I want to ask you too, also on just a personal level, the hustle and bustle between DC and Colorado. How was that personally for you, that move?
Yeah, it's you know, in DC, you really have to allow 1 hour to go anywhere, and that can be somewhere that's 2 miles away or 30. So you always have to allocate that 1 hour to get there. And it's really nice here in Colorado. Generally, like 20 or 30 minutes, I can allocate and be able to park and be able to be there on time. It's exciting to be in the bustle, no matter, you know, who's the president or who's in charge of Congress. It's always an exciting place to be, but I am certainly enjoying having fewer parking tickets, less time in the car, and just a little bit more of a relaxed lifestyle. But I will also say I came to Colorado thinking it would be more relaxed than it has been. I had this stereotype, which was perhaps unfair, that you know, state policy would move slower, and I don't think that's the case now that I've seen 3 legislative sessions. They are incredibly busy because they are truncated.
Yes, absolutely. So let's get into more of Colorado Succeeds.
Great.
So we, and by we, I mean the Colorado Business Roundtable, and the Business Roundtable at the national level, that is who we model after. It's one of our great partners. We have partnered with Colorado Succeeds on several public policy issues throughout the years. So first of all, thank you so much for your partnership. We really appreciate that. Without your voice helping us to get these policies turned over, I would be pretty impossible. So thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, so let's talk about what Colorado Succeeds does outside of public policy.
Sure.
I know that is your area of expertise for sure, but let's talk a little bit more overview of what Colorado Succeeds is and who might be interested in partnering with you.
That's great. Thank you, Alex, for that question. Colorado Succeeds is a nonprofit, nonpartisan coalition of business leaders dedicated to improving education in Colorado. We were created in 2006, so we've been around for a while. We've seen a lot of change in Colorado, I think a lot of positive changes. And our mission is really twofold at Colorado Succeeds. It's first to make sure that Colorado students receive the best education possible and have the best growth to maximize their potential. But the other part of the mission is to also ensure that Colorado employers have access to a skilled workforce. So it's really 2 parts. It's student focused, but it's also ensuring that our economy thrives and that businesses continue to grow and build a presence here in the state. And Colorado Succeeds really, I think, is focused on so much exciting work. And back in 2006, when we were originally created, a group of CEOs, bipartisan, Democrats, Republicans, came together and said, we need a stronger business voice for improving education in our state. And again, focused on the student, but also on the needs of employers, really that dual customer model. And I think Colorado Succeeds' mission is even important. It's even more important now than ever, and that is because of the rapid changes to our economy, the implications of that for the future of learning and the future of work. And the statistic that I often like to quote is that we know that 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030, which is not that far away, have not been invented yet. And I think we're seeing this in so many different industries. We are seeing such fast changes that the traditional system of our public education model is not going to be able to keep up. So our members, I think, have a true sense of urgency in tackling how can we make education more innovative and more agile. And the way that we've started to really talk about this, back in 2017, our members came together and we built a vision for what we think Colorado's education system needs to look like by 2030. So we're calling this Vision 2030. And it's something that we've shared with the Business Roundtable and many other business partners so that we can try to start speaking from a similar vernacular and have similar goals that we're working towards. But we really lay out in that vision the competencies that we think students need to have in order to be successful. And that's not just academic. That's, civic engagement, that's being entrepreneurial. It's those professional skills that we're not just in K-12 for academic success, but is really that well-rounded success for students. And then we also lay out experiences that we think students need, more work-based learning, more experiential learning, and the system level pillars and changes that are needed in order to have larger systemic changes. And the way, it sounds like a lot of work, and it's a lot of things to move forward. And to your question, Alex, we really see our work rooted in three key buckets. And it's not just policy, to your point. I'll be honest, Colorado Succeeds back in 2006, we were created mainly to focus on policy and advocacy, but that has shifted because we have learned, and our over 100 members, our 100 employers that we represent have learned, it takes more than just policy. That is an absolute part of it. I love it. I'm a wonk. Anyone who knows me knows that I love to talk about this stuff, but it's just a part of the puzzle piece when it comes to education. If you are just focused on policy, it will be a long life. You could pass every law in the world, but at the end of the day, here with local control being so strong with our 178 school districts in Colorado, implementation and practice at the ground level is critical. So to that point, we organize our work really around what we call the 3 Ps: policy, practice, and philanthropy. And I think the practice part is so critical because if you're not listening to school districts, if you're not listening to educators, you do not understand how your policies are impacting them or what their true needs are. So we really try to make sure that feedback loop is strong. But we also know that philanthropy is an important component of the Colorado infrastructure as well. So we try to work with philanthropic partners as well to channel capital funds and investments in ways that we think will lead to large systemic changes in education in Colorado.
Fantastic. And you guys are doing great work. You have been since 2006. And part of learning, right? You started out as just policy, and through learning and through your tenure, right, of being here in Colorado and leading these changes, you need to incorporate more. So I'm excited to see, because I think a lot of one thing that I didn't realize about Colorado until I got here at this job was how much businesses actually care about education. Yes, we want good employees. Of course we do. But that being said, they really care about what kind of education we're getting and making sure that everyone is on the same page and we can all dive into our own talent. We want to retain talent, right? We have a lot of people coming in and we're getting some great talent that come in, but we also want to retain what we've grown here. I'm sure you guys are definitely on that wagon as well. So let's talk a little bit about some current projects. I know that you guys did a work-based learning roadmap. So tell me a little bit about that. We did do a show on that, but how's that going? What kind of feedback did you get?
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
There are so many partners who are really energized. Business Roundtable, so many business partners, CareerWise Colorado. We have a very strong Colorado Workforce Development Council. We have so many partners who are interested in promoting work-based learning. But a gap that we were realizing was that some school districts are really far along in what does it look like to build a work-based learning partnership? What does it look like to partner with a single employer, an employer association, a chamber to really build out a high-quality internship program, industry credential programs, apprenticeship programs? But we have 178 school districts, and we have a state agency that is trying to provide information, but sometimes that can be limited. We really thought that there was a need to help more districts understand how to build these partnerships. And it's not just districts. The website, the roadmap that we've built is really supposed to be a tool that also helps businesses and higher ed understand what could it look like for us to come together and build a partnership. We've also cataloged a lot of some of the best practices and some of the exemplar sites that we've seen across the state, and that's another really important part of our work-based learning roadmap.
Fantastic. We have a few minutes here in this segment, so I want to talk to you a little bit about any future projects that you've got. What does the rest of 2019 into 2020 look like for Colorado Succeeds? Where are we headed next?
Sure, those are great questions, and I know a little bit later we'll be talking about a lot of excitement that we have. Before I maybe tell you about the rest of 2019, I might want to just quickly recap some of the big wins from, just because 2019 for me focused on policy in terms of our organization. That was really January through May, so I do want to tout some of the ways that we're trying to move forward our policy agenda. And when I was talking about the mission of our organization, you probably heard me use the word agile, and that's not by accident. Like, that is a true intentional phrase that we use often, because we really believe that in order for Colorado to thrive, that we need to build much more agile learners, educators, and systems. If we don't know what 85% of the jobs are going to be in 2030, we really have to ensure learners are more flexible, that they can adapt to changing environments, they can adapt to changing jobs, that they will not just have one skill set that remains static for 50 years in their career. And education's not built that way. So we really spent this legislative session educating policymakers, Democrats, Republicans, the governor, the State Board of Education. We worked closely with all of those key political entities, as well as the state agencies, Department of Education, the Department of Labor, their Workforce Development Council, as well as the Department of Higher Education, and feel really great about those partnerships that we've made. So the agenda that we pushed, focusing on agility, we break that down in agile learners, educators, and systems. And like I was saying earlier, an agile learner, you're not just learning what to learn, but how to learn. And it's a different way of teaching. And that's usually focused more on personalized learning, more competency-based strategy, really trying to see where is that student now and how can I really maximize their potential and help them be a more agile, flexible learner. In terms of agile educators, we want to make sure that our educators are also constantly upskilling and being flexible in their learnings as well. So we've really incentivized a lot of policies to try to upskill, provide more professional development, opportunities for more master's degrees, more industry certifications for educators, that they can also continue to adapt to what is needed in order to educate our students. And then I think agile systems is probably always the hardest one to describe. How do you really fundamentally transform public education? And that's really when I talk about removing barriers and finding ways through policy and practice to unleash innovation. So going back to the 2019 session, I think whenever you have a new governor elected, there's always a lot of excitement about what will be his priorities, what will we be able to move forward. And we just felt incredibly excited about the 2019 session. Clearly, anyone who followed it saw that it's a big year for early childhood education. In terms of education, I know BRT was probably following all aspects of what was happening at the state capitol. I was mainly focused on the education and workforce agenda. Yeah. So from that angle, early childhood education was a big win. The expansion for full-day kindergarten, which I know BRT supported, yes. Colorado Succeeds also supported from the very beginning, and was just really pleased to see that happen. Because if we're talking about students being agile and being able to take on more work-based learning opportunities, more experiential learning, none of that works if you don't have the fundamental building blocks that you need to be a strong learner. I think, as a few of our board members said, if a student can't read, they are not going to be able to take the other courses and opportunities that we're hoping for them, that more advanced placement coursework, concurrent enrollment, and apprenticeship and other work-based learning opportunities. So I think one of our big excitements for the session was we were able to secure an additional $3 million for the Career Development Fund, which incentivizes more work-based learning across our state. We had, back in 2016, originally passed this policy, and 27 school districts were participating. We're up to 37 school districts, and over 9,000 students have been awarded industry credentials aligned to in-demand industry. So they are not being sent down dead ends, but they are receiving credentials in high school aligned to coding occupations, healthcare, industries that are really booming for our state. And I know BRT was a supporter of this policy, which we really appreciated. Another big win from the 2019 session was a pilot that we were able to pass to really tackle seat time. This is a very archaic practice, over 100 years old, where students are funded based on how many hours they are sitting in a classroom. That is outdated. We know that if we need to have more agile learners, they need to be spending more time outside of the four walls of our classroom. And that can be in the workplace through work-based learning, but it can also be through outdoor leadership programs, through art classes outside of the community. It's more out-of-school learning experiences. And with over 100 school districts in Colorado down to a 4-day school week, we think there's a lot of opportunities to really unleash that out-of-school learning. So anyways, the pilot would start next year, and it would allow districts to have a much more simplified way of receiving their funding. Instead of their funding being based on hours in the classroom, it would just be based on the student, the school being able to certify that the student was enrolled in a high quality experiential learning opportunity. And if they were, then that would be enough to prove that the student deserved the funding for the school. So we're hoping that more practices like that can help schools think a lot more about competency-based education and out-of-school learning instead of being restricted to the four walls of the classroom.
I love that. That one's probably my personal favorite. We do need to take a quick break, so stay with us. We're going to get more into some of these policies that you guys have been working on and see what we've got planned. So stay with us here on Connect and Collaborate. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. You can find more information about everything we've talked about in the description below, so be sure to click on that link. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I'm having a fascinating conversation here with Kelly Caufield. She is the Vice President of Government Affairs at Colorado Succeeds. So thank you for staying with us.
Of course.
Yes. And so I cut you off a little bit in the last segment because I know we were talking about all of the big wins that we had legislatively speaking, but we have a few more. So let's talk a little bit more about those wins for the legislative session early 2019.
Thank you, Alex. Like I was saying, the agility agenda, we really worked hard to move that forward. And as I was referencing the pilot that passed, I really want to make sure I'm giving credit to the bill sponsors, have great partnership with Senator Jeff Bridges of Greenwood Village, Littleton, and Representative Shannon Byrd of Westminster. So both Democrats. We also received Republican support on the bill, clearly because it passed with very strong bipartisan support, but worked very closely with Bridges and Byrd to navigate this bill. And they just both strongly believe in the importance of more out-of-school learning experiences, more experiential learning. And again, that's really what that pilot will unleash. And that will start next year with 5 rural school districts, because we really think that's an important place to focus on more economic opportunity and more work-based learning opportunities. In addition to some of those wins from the legislative session, another really important bill that moved forward was legislation that Senator Paul Lundeen of Monument and Senator Jeff Bridges, again, moved forward, and that was a concurrent enrollment bill that expanded concurrent enrollment access for Colorado students. The most exciting part of that bill is that starting next school year, all school districts must offer students concurrent enrollment if the student wants to participate. So we really see that as a game changer, that if you can accelerate the high school experience and have more students graduating from high school with the credit that they need and having some post-secondary credit already under their belt, you just truly accelerate high-quality pathways and that next step that a student will take from high school onto college and career opportunities. We also, in that legislation, we're super excited when it comes to agile educators. I keep talking about the importance of upskilling, and a way that research has shown better outcomes for educators and students is more teachers receiving master's degrees in content areas. So not trying to dismiss the master's of education, but if you have a master's in biology, a master's in English, the studies show that you are a higher quality educator for those students. And that really helps that teacher that, if after a certain period of time they want to move out of the education profession, because as we prepare students for an agile economy, we also need to prepare educators. Both of my parents were school teachers, public school teachers in Virginia for 40 years, but that model is really shifting. A lot of people now want, it's the gig economy, and people really are looking for more shifts. As the jobs and the economy changes, people have to evolve as well. So educators with masters in English degrees, masters of biology, they are more marketable and are able to have more opportunities. So the concurrent enrollment bill also incentivized those kinds of opportunities for educators. And then I think some other, a final high-level win I would note is we're really excited about another bill that passed to allow more flexibility for how local school districts would like to measure success. We have a very strong accountability system in Colorado. That is critical. This bill would not replace that, but supplement it. We know that it's very important to measure students and school districts by their academic success. We need to know how students are performing on assessments in order to see what the achievement gaps, in order to target resources to those schools and students that need it the most. But sometimes if you're just focused on standardized tests, you might miss the larger picture. So legislation did pass that we were really excited to support, in addition to a lot of school districts supporting it as well, to allow districts to find some additional measures that they might want to look at, like college and career readiness, trying to find how many students are completing work-based learning, career and technical education, looking at alternative measures so that we can find other ways to hold, to really highlight schools instead of just math and reading scores. So excited about those wins too. So I think I'll stop there. Those are some of our exciting high-level wins, and we'll be back next session with more. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about next, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, congratulations. Those are some really big wins.
Thank you.
And I want to ask you, I want to take a moment here. So we know that the Denver educators, teachers protested this last legislative session for better pay. I may or may not be in Colorado Succeeds wheelhouse, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about it and your thoughts on that. Obviously, I think our educators are what brings up the next field of careers, right? Yep. They are breeding our leaders to be great leaders. That being said, I think they should have fair pay, personally speaking. But is there any justice in that? What kind of outlook do you guys have on that?
I think it's a great question, and it has to be asked. As I said, I'm the daughter of two public school teachers, so one of four kids, so completely understand the financial situation that a lot of our educators find themselves in. I think one way that Colorado Succeeds is interested in this conversation is through how do we upskill educators? How do we provide them more education so that they can continue to market themselves and to hopefully have a higher earning potential in their careers? And I think we've passed a few policies that allow for more professional development. Back in, I believe it was a 2017 legislative session, we worked with Crisanta Duran and Kevin Grantham on a big computer science bill. And a part of that bill was creating a professional development grant program for educators. And this idea was, if you're a kindergarten teacher, if you're an elementary school teacher and you want to upskill and try something new, they could go to a coding boot camp or receive a credential in computer science or even a degree in computer science and then be eligible to teach computer science in high school. And we know that's a hard to fill job. School districts often pay more for those hard to fill positions. So that was a way that we were trying to help that educator receive more education and training that would set them up hopefully for a higher wage within the public education system, or maybe outside of it if they decide to move on to a different sector after having a career in public education. I would also say there's a lot of concern that some school districts could be pushing more money down to teachers for compensation packages. I think there's a lot of administrative costs tied up at districts that could be pushed down more.
Fantastic. I appreciate your outlook on that. That being said, you've mentioned this upskilling and moving around of careers, right? One of the things that I feel like millennials have done is really push this agenda, one, for flexibility of work, but also you see more and more younger generations, those just getting out of college right now. So Gen Zers as well are following on this, but tend to jump careers every 3 to 5 years, right? And I think it's a change that we saw that was brought about by millennial generation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's right. When I worked at the HR Association, we would poll our members and all of their employees, and the younger workforce absolutely is craving more flexibility, a lot more flexibility over where, when, and how work is occurring. And it's really pushing managers, HR managers, and CEOs to really rethink what their benefits packages look like. What does a work-flex policy look like? I think that's absolutely where the workforce is. And that is another reason why Colorado Succeeds is pushing for more agile learners and educators, because we know that that is the mindset of a lot of our young people. And if we're not responsive to that, public education is going to truly be left behind. It has to be moving as fast as they are. I think one way that a policy, to just bring it back to policy, that is relevant to this conversation is a bill that we worked on this session in 2019 with Barbara McLaughlin of Durango and Tim Geithner from Colorado Springs. We were not able to get it across the final hurdle, but we're hopeful that Governor Polis will bring it back as a part of his budget request. And it actually really leads into this conversation of the gig economy, millennials wanting to kind of change jobs more often, looking for more flexible environments to maybe have multiple jobs, be a consultant, be a independent contractor. And the idea is students who have prior work experience, that should translate for some level of post-secondary education. Yeah. And there are frameworks that a lot of community colleges have already set up, and some of our 4 years, but there's no statewide policy that helps a student understand how their prior work experience or training could lead to post-secondary education. So if we build a more permeable higher education system that is kind of respecting a student that may come in and out and be working, go to school at night, or they're doing something online, we want to make sure that they're able to carry that credit that they are receiving with them, and that it can transfer on to whatever education and training program or institution that they are in. So if a student is starting in a community college, plus they've been doing some work on-the-job training, DeVita, one of our members, many other employers in Colorado have great relationships already with really agile institutions of higher education like CSU Global. Super impressed with them. I know COBRT does a lot of work with them too. They're great. We want to make sure that DeVita's on-the-job training that they provide for their dialysis technicians, that leads to post-secondary credit that is eligible at a Colorado institution, and that can transfer on to that student's next place. So transfer of credit and post-secondary institutions are not agile at all. And to your point, the millennial workforce is certainly agile. So we're just trying to do a lot of thinking there about how could you make transfer of credit and credit-bearing courses and work experience work better for that student who's not just going to be in one job or have that traditional 4-year college experience. So more work is needed there, but that's how we are trying to address it through policy.
Yeah, which is a great way to go about getting things done, right? That's government really makes kind of the the country go round, if you will. So on that same note, I do want to talk about, you guys have some great things that you're working on for the next legislative session. So walk me through these. First of all, what's your favorite of these?
Well, thank you so much, Alex. Really appreciate COBRT giving us this opportunity to kind of highlight, preview some policy ideas that we will be unveiling later this month in July. You keep hearing me talk about agility, Vision 2030, but what does that mean in policy? And that has been a very hard question. So we've spent over almost a year now working with some of the best experts we can find across the country and here in Colorado, some of our higher ed partners, K-12 partners, other business leaders who really have cutting edge policy ideas for how we move education forward. So that's really what this series of policy papers will be. They're going to be a series of agility policy papers, and they focus on three main buckets. One is rethinking how we fund high schools. The second is really blurring the lines between high school and post-secondary credit, more concurrent enrollment, more creative approaches to concurrent enrollment. And then the third is improving opportunities for students in rural communities. So those are the three larger buckets. These were the ideas that kept coming up as we did a landscape of the education scenery here in Colorado and talked to some of these experts that I referenced. Those were the three ideas that kept rising to the top as areas that continue to provide, they have barriers and they need policy adjustments.
Yes.
To say in the least. You know, when you ask me what's my favorite, I'm a realist, so I focus on the ones where I see a potential policy window opening. I have a master's in public policy, which I didn't really talk about at the beginning, but that was one of the things I remember the most. Like, policy is not going to work unless there is a window of opportunity. And as you probably know, there's a school finance interim committee convening right now. This is their third year. This was originally led by Alec Garnett and Paul Lundeen. Paul Lundeen is still a leader of this committee. Owen Hill has also been very involved. And they have just started to reconvene this session. And I think there's a lot of hope and expectation that after 3 years, that they are going to move forward with some legislative ideas coming out of that committee that would be ripe for 2020. So I think our policy suggestions around how do you really rethink high school funding, that's what gets me the most excited because I see a window of opportunity there. And as you heard me say earlier, we were super excited in the 2019 session to pass a pilot. You know, that means like it's a test. You know, you start small. It's not a statewide mandate. You take a group of the willing and you test a new idea. And if it's successful, you scale. That's a business model. That's a business principle that Succeeds uses. All of our policy work is truly guided by what we call business principles, and that's how businesses operate too. What is the ROI? Does this help with accountability? How does this help with transparency? We're putting students first. That's kind of our framework when we're looking at policies, and that's certainly the framework for these future policies for 2020. So the one idea is really trying to scale the idea of how we look at seat time and removing for once and all restrictions on how schools are funded right now, which is really based on hours in the classroom. You know, other ideas that we'll be looking at is how could we leverage funding for more out of school learning? It's not just the seat time restrictions. There are other challenges with having more out of school learning. So we have a few ideas there for how that could be expanded. And then I think there's also a lot that could be done with how we fund early college high schools, and that's a very creative and exciting model that Colorado has. There's early college high schools in a variety of districts in the state. There's also an early college model called PTech, which stands for Pathways and Technology Early College High Schools. IBM has been a strong proponent of this. That is a member of ours, but we would be championing it even if they weren't. I'm sure you all work very closely with IBM as well. They are doing great work in this space. And we'd love to see more of these schools replicated across the state. They're not only limited to our higher resource districts, but we'd love to see a little more equity and have them in more parts. And we think we have some suggestions for how state-based aid could maybe be tweaked so that more school districts could partner with higher education institutions and expand these early college options. We hear often that the senior year is a wasted senior year, accelerating high school so that students are graduating from high school with at least an associate's degree, which is what a P-TECH will give you, an early college high school will give you. We think all students should have that opportunity. We know the high school diploma is not enough, so why is that the expectation when you graduate? We think it should be that plus the post-secondary education. There's even talk of could you really leverage more out of school learning through because of I think the fact that 100 of our school districts are now on a 4-day school week, I think there's a lot of interest in how could we really change funding models and scheduling requirements so that more students could take advantage of that 5th day. And since they're out of school already, could that also be a part of their educational experience? If it makes sense, I'll move on to some of the other ideas that we have outside of changes to funding, because while there is that policy window, changes to funding they're also some of the hardest ones to move forward. Yes. So we'll be talking about these with the members of the school finance committee. We hope we get some traction, but it's important for us to focus on some other ideas as well. And that second bucket is really blurring the lines between high school and post-secondary credit. We know that students need the chance to build more relevant and rigorous and transferable skills in high school through work and community-based learning opportunities. But again, there are lots of barriers to having this actually happen. And currently in Colorado, course credit for work-based learning, such as apprenticeships and other concurrent enrollment opportunities, it's managed by the district or the school where that student is enrolled. So one idea that New Hampshire has started to move forward is, could you grant an intermediary nonprofit organization the ability to award course credit instead of the school district? So this would, could it be, if you are receiving education through a nonprofit, or if you are receiving it through an intermediary, if you're receiving a job training course or a career and technical education course, and it's not offered by the school, but it's being offered by an employer, or if it's offered by another nonprofit training partner. There are a lot of nonprofit training partners here in the state that CWDC works with, the Workforce Development Centers. Could they award course credit for students? So that's an idea that it's a big idea, but it's really taking, it would be a way to push a lot of our learning outside of the 4 walls of the classroom, if other entities could actually award the credit.
Yeah.
So that's a big idea.
That is a big idea. It's definitely outside the box. I like that, though.
Good. Yeah. And then also what we talked about earlier, which, working with Barbara McLaughlin and Tim Geithner in the Department of Higher Education, we are hoping to bring back, again, this is talking about post-secondary credit, a larger statewide framework for prior learning. So your prior work experience counting as post-secondary credit, and having that credit that you receive, and that could be transferable as you move along your educational pathways. So that's a policy that we'll be working on again. And then the final bucket is really improving access for students in rural Colorado. I know that COBRT does a lot with the Rural Schools Alliance. We work closely with them as well. We love Michelle Murphy and everything that they're doing. But we also want to equip them for greater success. We know that 80% of the school districts in Colorado are rural. So we have 178. 80% of those receive a rural designation here in Colorado. And there's a lot that could be done to improve student access. One barrier that we hear often is Colorado's, there might be an opportunity in Colorado's teacher waiver law so that more industry experts could teach CTE classes in rural Colorado. And I know this is something that COBRT and our members would have a lot of interest in trying to figure out. I think another way we help increase course access to rural students in Colorado is another policy that I talked about earlier, and that is, in order to teach concurrent enrollment in Colorado, you have to have a master's degree. But a lot of the educators in rural Colorado do not have those. So that's why that was built into the concurrent enrollment bill that passed earlier this year as an allowable use of a competitive grant program that was a part of that bill, to upskill more educators to receive those master's degrees so they would actually be eligible to teach concurrent enrollment. So that's another idea that we are working on. And I think the third is really the fact that we could really do a lot more career and technical education in rural Colorado if we allowed more employers to count as the lab component. So in order to receive credit for a lot of career and technical education courses, it's not just inside the classroom. You have to have a lab component. So the policy idea of allowing that lab component to happen at an employer site. So again, you're hearing this reoccurring theme of really trying to push learning outside of the classroom. And there's just a lot of levers you can do it through. You can do it through course credit, through funding, through changes to the career and technical education state laws. So those are some things that we are interested in exploring and are super excited to continue to work on these. I don't think we're going to come out and say, this is it, this is what it looks like. We know that they're agile policies, they're evolving, so we're certainly open to many more conversations over this summer with legislators and other stakeholders to refine these ideas so they're really ready to go for the 2020 session.
Oh, fantastic. Those are some great policies, and I really hope that you guys get some solid traction on that. I think personally my favorite, I love this idea of working with the rural communities and ensuring that students are getting the education outside of the classroom. And that's been a theme for all of them, but specifically talking about like, you don't have to have an education background. You just need a master's in this certain subject to be able to teach kids. I think that is lovely. We do have just 1 minute left here. Where can I find more information about Colorado Succeeds?
ColoradoSucceeds.org is our website. Would love to, make sure that all of your members and everyone who's listening would go to our website, sign up for our wonderful monthly newsletter, and learn more about our Succeeds Prize. I'd have to give a shout out. That is September 19th, and this is our 3rd annual Succeeds Prize that's happening later this year. Last year, we had nearly 1,000 educators packed in the house, and we celebrated with them. And what the Succeeds Prize is a series of awards where we are naming the top elementary school, middle school, high school, the top innovation schools, those schools that are really living out this Vision 2030, this agility. We want to be able to really highlight more examples because that's how I learn the best, if I can learn from another example. And it's the same for school administrators and educators. So if we can really highlight those winners, we hope that will inspire even more schools and districts to learn from those that are the prize winners. We work very closely with a lot of our members who are corporate sponsors of these awards, and really excited to put on another big show. Each school will win, I think we awarded over $150,000 in award money last year to schools and educators. So excited to have that celebration and hope that you all can join us September 19th.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kelly. This was fascinating. I look forward to hearing more, and we will get in touch with you soon for a follow-up on all of this, as well as the Succeeds Prize.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Once again, be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. You can find this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Have a great day.